Hey guys, tonight we are going on a journey, not to a land of epic battles or grand romances, but to a quieter corner of history, a place where the dust motes dance lazily in sunbeams, and the greatest drama might be a misplaced quill. You are about to immerse yourself in the long and largely uneventful reign of King Aethelred, the mostly ignored. Prepare yourselves, for this is a tale that might just lull you into a profound historical slumber, a sleep from which you probably won't survive until morning without hitting replay. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself drifting back, not through a vortex of flashing lights and booming thunder, but through a hazy, almost dreamlike portal. The air around you feels thick with the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke, a smell that speaks of a simpler, slower time. You are arriving in Anglo-Saxon England, a land of scattered settlements, of thatched roofs and muddy tracks. It's a place where the rustle of leaves in the wind might be the most exciting sound you hear for hours. And you are here for a king. Not a king of legends, not a king whose name echoes through the halls of history like a trumpet blast, but a king whose reign was, for the most part, remarkably quiet. You see, when you picture medieval monarchs, you probably imagine crowns gleaming with jewels, swords clashing, and dramatic pronouncements. But as you settle into this historical landscape, you begin to realize that not every king's story is a sweeping epic. Some are more like a gentle hum, a quiet background noise to the grander narratives playing out elsewhere. You are here specifically in the year 978 AD, a year that, on the grand tapestry of human events, barely registers a blip. The previous king, Edward the Martyr, met an untimely end, a detail that, while tragic for him, was rather convenient for young Aethelred, who was suddenly thrust onto the throne. He was just a boy, a mere child of 10, and you can almost feel the weight of a crown too large for his head. Imagine, for a moment, being handed the keys to a kingdom at an age when most children are still trying to master their multiplication tables. It's enough to make anyone a bit overwhelmed. You might even chuckle at the thought of a kingdom being run by a committee of worried regents whispering amongst themselves, trying to decipher the whims of a preteen king. One mainstream historical fact you immediately absorb is that Aethelred's ascension was indeed controversial, tainted by suspicions surrounding Edward's death. It's a subtle undercurrent, a faint ripple in the otherwise calm waters of his early reign. But even this controversy seemed to dissipate quickly, like a wisp of smoke, leaving behind only the placid surface of daily life. You observe the meticulous, if somewhat repetitive, routines of the royal court. The scribes, hunched over their vellum, diligently copying charters and decrees that mostly concern land ownership or minor disputes over livestock. You notice the endless procession of minor nobility, petitioning for favors, for a bit of land, for recognition. It's a slow-moving, bureaucratic dance, punctuated by the occasional feast where the most exciting event might be a particularly well-roasted boar. You lean in closer, trying to catch a whisper of intrigue, a hint of rebellion, but all you hear is the gentle clinking of tankards and the low murmur of conversation about the harvest. It's almost as if the kingdom itself is taking a collective nap. You might even find yourself stifling a yawn. A quirky tidbit you pick up is that King Aethelred, despite his eventual moniker, was initially called Unread, not in the sense of ill-counseled or badly advised, as it later came to mean, but rather as no counsel or unadvised. It's a subtle linguistic shift that historians still debate. Was he truly lacking in good advice from the beginning, or did the name evolve to reflect his perceived failures much later? This scholarly debate hovers in the air like a faint scent of old parchment. You ponder this for a moment. Perhaps he wasn't inherently inept, just a bit unlucky with his advisors, or perhaps his advisors were just as uneventful as his reign. It's a mystery wrapped in a linguistic enigma, and you feel a gentle smile touch your lips at the thought of academics passionately arguing over a single Anglo-Saxon prefix. You imagine a group of very serious scholars poring over ancient texts, their brows furrowed in concentration, all over a name. It's rather endearing, isn't it? You consider how a name can shape perception, how a slight linguistic misinterpretation can brand a king for 1,000 years. It's almost like calling someone Sir Snore-a-lot, and then wondering why no one expects them to be a brave knight. The days blend into weeks, the weeks into months. You see Aethelred grow from a boy to a young man. He attends church services, he presides over the Witnegamo, the assembly of wise men, where he mostly listens, nodding occasionally and perhaps signing a few documents with a flourish that suggests more confidence than actual involvement. You observe the rhythm of the seasons, the planting, the harvesting, the quiet celebrations. The most dramatic thing you witness might be a particularly stubborn donkey refusing to move. You find yourself appreciating the mundane, the predictable. There's a certain comfort in the lack of grand upheaval. You almost feel a kinship with the villagers, whose lives are dictated by the sun and the soil, not by the fickle whims of distant kingdoms or invading armies. You realize that for many, an uneventful reign is a blessing, a period of stability, a time to simply live. You might even find yourself wishing your own life had a bit more of this quiet predictability. As you continue your gentle perusal of Aethelred's early years, you notice the subtle hum of the countryside, the distant bleating of sheep, the rhythmic thud of a blacksmith's hammer. It's a soundscape of peaceful productivity. You observe the local reeves, the king's representatives in the shires, going about their duties with a quiet efficiency. They collect taxes, settle minor disputes, and ensure the king's peace, or at least a reasonable facsimile of it. You see them dressed in practical, homespun garments, their faces weathered by sun and wind, embodying the sturdy, unglamorous backbone of the kingdom. You realize that the day-to-day running of a medieval state was less about heroic deeds and more about meticulous administration, about ensuring that the grain silos were full and the roads were passable, even if they were mostly just muddy tracks. It's a far cry from the dramatic narratives you might have read in school. You witness a particularly lengthy court session where the primary topic of discussion is the exact boundaries of a particular pasture. The arguments stretch on, detailed and arcane, involving ancient charters and sworn testimonies. You might find yourself nodding off, lulled by the drone of voices discussing fences and grazing rights. It's a comedy of the mundane, really. Imagine the impassioned speeches, the raised eyebrows, the dramatic sighs, all over a field that probably looks exactly like every other field for miles around. You almost expect someone to pull out a magnifying glass to inspect a particularly significant blade of grass. You have to admit, it's a refreshing change from stories of betrayals and sieges. One mainstream historical fact that gently nudges its way into your awareness is the increasing importance of the church during this period. You see bishops and abbots moving with a quiet authority, their monastic houses serving as centers of learning and administration. They are advisors to the king, often the most literate and organized members of society. You observe the construction of new churches, the dedication of new relics, the quiet spread of Christian teachings. The spiritual fabric of the kingdom is as woven into daily life as the wool in the tunics of the common folk. You might even notice the rhythmic chanting from a nearby monastery, a constant, comforting backdrop to the otherwise quiet existence. A quirky tidbit that catches your attention is the widespread belief in portents and omens. You hear hushed whispers about unusual weather patterns, about strange lights in the sky, about animals behaving oddly. These events are interpreted as signs, messages from a higher power, though often their meaning is ambiguous and open to multiple interpretations. You witness a group of villagers anxiously discussing a flock of birds that flew in a peculiar formation. Was it a sign of good fortune or impending doom? The debate is as lively as any political discussion, though far less consequential. It's a reminder that even in a seemingly dull reign, the human mind craves a touch of the mysterious, a hint of the supernatural. You can almost hear someone saying, "Well, the chickens laid blue eggs this morning, so we're either getting a new king or a really good omelet." Historians still argue whether Aethelred genuinely held much power in his early years, or if he was largely a figurehead for a powerful regency council. You see hints of both. There are moments when he seems to make decisions, albeit small ones, and other times when he appears to simply ratify the recommendations of his advisors. This scholarly debate adds a subtle layer of intrigue to the otherwise placid narrative. Was he truly a puppet king, or just a quiet observer, learning the ropes? You watch his expressions, trying to discern a flicker of independent thought. A hint of the king he would become. But mostly, you see a young man navigating a complex world with quiet reserve. It's like watching a really slow chess game, where the players take forever to make their moves, and you're not even sure if the king is actually moving his own pieces. You notice the quiet rhythm of the seasons shaping everything. The planting in spring, the harvest in autumn, the long, dark nights of winter. Life is inextricably linked to the land, to the cycles of nature. You see the efforts of the farmers, their backs bent over the soil, their hopes tied to the weather. It's a reminder of the fundamental stability of agrarian society, where change comes slowly, almost imperceptibly. You feel the cool breeze, the warmth of the sun, the gentle patter of rain. These are the real events, the true drivers of the kingdom's life, far more impactful than any royal decree or courtly intrigue. You even see a group of children playing a simple game with sticks and pebbles, their laughter echoing in the quiet air, a timeless sound that transcends centuries. You reflect on how little the fundamental human experience changes, even as the world around it transforms. The subtle shift in the air, the slightly firmer set of Aethelred's jaw as he grows from a boy into a young man, tells you that the regency is slowly, imperceptibly, loosening its grip. You observe him attending more frequently to petitions, listening with a slightly more engaged expression, even if his contributions to the discussions remain minimal. It's a gradual assumption of power, more like a slow, deliberate stretch in the morning than a sudden, dramatic awakening. You almost wish for a moment of fiery defiance, a sudden declaration of authority, but Aethelred's path is not one of bombast. It's a path of quiet, almost hesitant transition. You might even find yourself whispering, "Come on, Aethelred, give us a little drama." But alas, it's not to be. You find yourself drawn to the details of daily life in the villages, the sounds of looms clacking, the smell of baking bread from communal ovens, the distant cries of market vendors. These are the true heartbeat of the kingdom, far removed from the quiet deliberations of the court. You see families working together, children helping with chores, a sense of community that feels both ancient and comforting. It's a reminder that history isn't just about kings and battles, but about the countless, ordinary lives that form the vast tapestry of the past. You watch a group of women gossiping by the well, their voices a low murmur, their laughter soft and genuine. It's a timeless scene, one that could play out in almost any era. One mainstream historical fact that begins to become more apparent is the system of justice. You see local courts, known as hundred courts and shire courts, operating with a surprising degree of formality. Disputes are settled, often through the testimony of oath helpers or by ordeal. You witness an accusation of theft being resolved by a man carrying a hot iron. His hand, bandaged and scrutinized, will determine his innocence or guilt. It's a method that seems utterly foreign to your modern sensibilities. Yet here, it's accepted as a legitimate way to ascertain truth. You might wince inwardly at the thought of such a trial, but you also recognize the underlying desire for order and a clear resolution, however unorthodox the method. You can't help but wonder if there were any particularly good actors among the accused. A quirky tidbit that emerges from the daily routines is the Anglo-Saxon fondness for riddles. You hear them exchanged around hearth fires, simple poetic puzzles designed to entertain and challenge. They often describe everyday objects or animals in metaphorical language. "I have a head but no eyes," one person might say, "and I often cause a fuss." The answer, of course, is a hammer. You might even try to guess a few yourself, finding a quiet amusement in the clever wordplay. It's a testament to the quiet intellectual life that existed alongside the more practical concerns of survival. You imagine people huddled around a fire, perhaps on a long winter's night, trying to outwit each other with these linguistic brain teasers. It's a far cry from the modern world's endless stream of entertainment, but no less engaging. Historians still argue about the exact nature of Anglo-Saxon land ownership during this period. Was it purely a feudal system, with all land ultimately belonging to the king, or were there remnants of older, more communal forms of ownership? You see evidence that supports both interpretations. You observe charters granting land to individuals, but also customs and practices that suggest a strong communal bond to the land. This scholarly debate adds a subtle layer of complexity to the seemingly simple agricultural landscape. You might even feel a slight intellectual itch, wanting to dive deeper into the nuances of ancient property law. It's a good thing you're just observing, because disentangling Anglo-Saxon land tenure could put even the most dedicated scholar to sleep. The seasons continue their relentless march. You feel the bite of winter, the relief of spring, the languor of summer. The rhythm of life is slow, predictable, and deeply rooted in the land. You see the young men of the village training with wooden swords, not for grand battles, but for local defense, for the occasional skirmish with a neighboring settlement over a disputed boundary or a few stolen sheep. It's a world of small-scale conflicts, quickly resolved, rarely escalating into widespread warfare. The greatest threat seems to be the unpredictable weather, or perhaps a particularly persistent pest infestation. You observe a farmer grumbling about a late frost, his worry palpable. These are the real anxieties, the true challenges of the day, far more pressing than any distant royal decree. You notice the way people rely on each other, the quiet acts of neighborly kindness that weave through the fabric of daily life. It's a world where human connection is vital, not just for comfort, but for survival. As Aethelred approaches full adulthood, you sense a subtle shift in his demeanor. He no longer seems quite so overwhelmed, though he certainly doesn't exude a confident, kingly aura either. He's more like a man who has slowly, almost grudgingly, settled into a comfortable, if somewhat ill-fitting, armchair. You observe him at court, listening more attentively, occasionally interjecting a question or a comment that suggests a growing understanding of the intricacies of governance. It's not a dramatic transformation, but a quiet evolution, like watching a sapling slowly grow into a tree. You might even find yourself giving a quiet, encouraging nod, as if he can sense your approval across the centuries. You see the slow but steady development of Anglo-Saxon towns. While still small by modern standards, places like Winchester, London, and York are bustling centers of trade and craftsmanship. You walk through narrow, winding streets, inhaling the mingled scents of wood smoke, baking bread, and unwashed humanity. You see merchants haggling over prices, artisans crafting intricate jewelry and tools, and farmers bringing their produce to market. It's a vibrant, if somewhat chaotic, scene, a stark contrast to the quiet agricultural rhythm of the countryside. You even catch a glimpse of a juggler performing for a small crowd, his colorful balls a flash of brilliance against the muted tones of the town. One mainstream historical fact that becomes more prominent is the increasing influence of monastic reforms. You observe the growth of Benedictine monasteries, with their emphasis on strict discipline, scholarship, and liturgical purity. These institutions are not just centers of religious life. They are also economic powerhouses, managing vast estates and producing valuable manuscripts. You witness the dedication of a new monastery, the solemn procession of monks, their chants echoing across the fields. It's a powerful force, shaping the spiritual and intellectual landscape of the kingdom, often far more effectively than any king. You might even consider that the monks are doing more of the actual governing than Aethelred himself. A quirky tidbit that brings a smile to your face is the Anglo-Saxon love of feasting and drinking. You observe a particularly boisterous gathering in a lord's hall, where mead flows freely, and the air is filled with laughter and the strumming of lyres. Guests recline on benches, telling stories and singing songs, their faces flushed with good cheer. It's a reminder that even in a world often characterized by hardship, there was still plenty of joy and camaraderie. You almost wish you could join them to sample the mead and hear a few of their ancient tales. You wonder if Aethelred ever loosened up at these events, or if he remained as quiet and reserved as he appears in court. Probably the latter. He was likely the guy who just politely sipped his mead and left early. Historians still argue about the exact nature of Anglo-Saxon kinship ties and their impact on political power. Was bloodline the ultimate determinant of authority, or did personal loyalty and military prowess play a more significant role? You see examples that support both arguments. You observe powerful ealdormen, often related to the royal family, wielding considerable influence in their own regions, almost like mini kings. But you also see individuals of more humble origins rising through the ranks due to their abilities. This scholarly debate highlights the fluid and sometimes contradictory nature of power in this era. It's a complex web of relationships, far more intricate than a simple family tree. You might even feel a bit dizzy trying to untangle all the overlapping loyalties and rivalries. The general peace of the realm continues, a remarkable stretch of quiet stability for a NY medieval kingdom. There are no grand invasions, no devastating civil wars, just the steady pulse of daily life. You see the farmers tending their crops, the craftsmen honing their skills, the children growing up in a world largely free from widespread conflict. It's a period of gentle consolidation, of slow growth, rather than dramatic expansion. You might even call it a period of historical breathing room, a chance for the kingdom to simply exist without constant existential threats. You notice the contented expressions on people's faces, the quiet hum of prosperity, however modest. It's a pleasant, almost idyllic scene, one that you could easily imagine settling into for a good, long nap. You consider that perhaps the greatest gift a king can give his people is not glorious victory, but rather peace and quiet. As the years of Aethelred's rule stretch onward, you begin to appreciate the subtle rhythms of his reign. There are no sudden, dramatic shifts in policy, no grand pronouncements that reshape the landscape. Instead, you witness a steady continuation of existing practices, a quiet reinforcement of the status quo. It's like watching a gentle stream flow ever onward without any sudden rapids or waterfalls. You find a certain comfort in this predictability, a sense of calm that settles over the historical narrative. You might even find yourself subconsciously adjusting your breathing to match the slow, even pace of events. You observe the meticulous process of manuscript illumination in monastic scriptoria. Monks, with incredible patience, painstakingly copy and decorate religious texts, their hands steady, their focus absolute. You see the vibrant colors of ground minerals, the delicate strokes of squirrel hair brushes, the intricate patterns of interlace and zoomorphic designs. These are not just books, they are works of art, testaments to a quiet dedication and a profound spiritual devotion. It's a testament to the fact that even in a seemingly uneventful era, great beauty and artistry can flourish. You might find yourself mesmerized by the delicate work, wondering how they managed such precision without modern tools. One mainstream historical fact that begins to loom on the distant horizon, though still a faint cloud, is the increasing threat of Viking raids. While Aethelred's early reign is marked by relative peace, you occasionally hear whispers of attacks on coastal settlements in other parts of Britain or across the narrow seas. These are not yet a direct threat to the heartland of his kingdom, but they serve as a subtle reminder of the precarious nature of peace in this turbulent age. You imagine the distant clang of swords, the shouts of raiders, and then the quiet returns, leaving only the memory of a fleeting apprehension. It's like a distant rumble of thunder on a sunny day, a warning of a storm that has not yet arrived. A quirky tidbit that you encounter is the importance of beekeeping in Anglo-Saxon society. You see numerous hives, their busy inhabitants producing not only honey, a crucial sweetener, but also beeswax for candles and mead. Beekeepers are respected figures, their knowledge of these industrious insects passed down through generations. You hear the low hum of the bees, a surprisingly soothing sound, and watch the careful collection of honey. It's a reminder of the ingenious ways people adapted to their environment and utilized its resources. You can almost taste the sweet, rich honey. You wonder if King Aethelred ever indulged in a bit of honey cake, or if he was too busy being mostly ignored. Historians still argue about the precise extent of Anglo-Saxon trade networks during Aethelred's reign. While local markets are clearly vibrant, was there significant long-distance trade with continental Europe, or was the economy largely self-sufficient? You see evidence of both. You observe foreign goods, such as fine pottery or imported textiles, making their way into the larger towns, suggesting external connections. But you also see the overwhelming majority of goods being produced and consumed locally. This scholarly debate highlights the complex interplay between local economies and broader international connections. You might even imagine a medieval merchant, carefully navigating the choppy waters of the English Channel, hoping to make a decent profit on his latest consignment of goods. It's a good thing they didn't have to deal with customs declarations. The quiet progression of life continues. You see families celebrate births, mourn deaths, and mark the passage of time with the rhythm of the seasons and the cycle of the church calendar. There's a strong sense of community, of shared burdens and shared joys. You witness a village feast, the air filled with music and laughter, a momentary escape from the toil of daily life. These are the threads that truly weave the fabric of society, far more enduring than any royal decree. You notice the simple pleasures, the genuine smiles, the comfort of human connection. It's a poignant reminder that even in a seemingly unremarkable era, life is lived with depth and meaning. You might even feel a sense of longing for such simple, profound connections. The air around you, once so calm and consistently quiet, begins to carry a faint, almost imperceptible tremor. It's not a violent vibration, but a subtle hum, a distant, unsettling drone that suggests something is stirring beyond the peaceful borders of Aethelred's realm. You observe the increased vigilance in coastal communities, the building of watchtowers, the nervous glances cast towards the sea. The whispers of Viking raids, once a distant rumor, now grow slightly louder, more frequent, a disquieting undercurrent beneath the placid surface of daily life. You might find yourself unconsciously tensing, a slight unease settling in your own historical awareness. You witness the king, now a mature man, presiding over councils with a slightly more confident air, though still far from assertive. He listens to reports of minor skirmishes on the borders, of demands for tribute from aggressive neighbors. He makes decisions, often after lengthy deliberation, decisions that seem aimed primarily at maintaining the status quo, at preserving the existing peace, however fragile. It's a strategy of containment, of managing small problems before they escalate into larger ones. You almost want to shout, "Do something dramatic, Aethelred," but you know it's not in his nature. His reign is a testament to the art of subtle avoidance, of quietly sweeping things under the rug. One mainstream historical fact that now comes into sharper focus is the practice of Danegeld. You hear discussions about payments made to Viking raiders to ward off attacks. It's a controversial policy, one that some argue only encourages more raids, while others see it as a necessary evil, a pragmatic solution to protect the kingdom from devastation. You observe the collection of silver, the meticulous weighing of coins, the sense of quiet resignation among those who must pay. It's a heavy burden, a constant drain on the kingdom's resources, a stark reminder that peace often comes at a price. You might even hear a disgruntled farmer muttering about giving good silver to those pagan ruffians. A quirky tidbit that emerges from this growing tension is the reliance on a network of beacons and signal fires to warn of approaching threats. You see the construction of these simple, yet effective communication systems on hilltops and along the coast. The sight of smoke rising from a distant beacon would send a ripple of anxiety through the surrounding communities, a silent alarm signaling potential danger. It's a primitive but effective early warning system, relying on the vigilance of ordinary people. You can almost imagine the hurried scramble to light the fires, the frantic efforts to spread the word. It's a world where a puff of smoke can mean the difference between safety and ruin. It's a good thing they didn't have to deal with false alarms from someone burning their dinner. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of Aethelred's defensive strategies, particularly the Danegeld. Did it genuinely buy time for the kingdom to strengthen its defenses, or did it simply make England a more attractive target for further raids? You see evidence to support both sides of this scholarly debate. There are periods of relative calm after payments, suggesting some success, but there are also renewed attacks, indicating that the policy was far from a perfect solution. This ongoing discussion highlights the complexity of medieval warfare and diplomacy, where every decision had unforeseen consequences. You might even find yourself pondering the eternal question: is it better to pay off a bully or stand your ground? Aethelred, it seems, preferred the former, at least for a while. Despite the mounting external pressures, the internal workings of the kingdom remain remarkably stable. The legal system continues to function, the church maintains its influence, and agricultural life proceeds with its familiar rhythms. You observe the resilience of the common people, their ability to adapt to changing circumstances, to endure hardship with quiet determination. They continue their daily lives, working the land, raising their families, finding solace in their communities and their faith. It's a testament to the deep roots of Anglo-Saxon society, its ability to weather storms, even if those storms are beginning to gather on the horizon. You notice the subtle shift in the conversations, from purely local concerns to a shared apprehension about the future. But even this apprehension is quiet, a low thrum beneath the surface of everyday noise. The quiet hum of apprehension you noticed in the previous section is now beginning to resonate with a little more force. It's not a crescendo, but a steady, persistent beat, like a distant drum that slowly rose louder. You observe the king, Aethelred, now firmly established in his reign, but still lacking the decisive leadership that a turbulent age might demand. He listens to his advisors, sometimes with a furrowed brow, sometimes with a look of quiet resignation. He is a man caught between the desire for peace and the grim reality of a world that is becoming increasingly violent. You almost feel a pang of sympathy for him, a king who simply wants to maintain the quiet equilibrium of his realm. You notice the increased training of the Fiad, the Anglo-Saxon militia composed of freemen. You see men, typically farmers and craftsmen, practicing with spears and shields, their movements a little clumsy, a little uncoordinated. They are not professional soldiers, but ordinary men called upon to defend their homes. Their determination is clear, but so is their lack of extensive military experience. It's a stark contrast to the seasoned Viking warriors, and you can't help but feel a growing sense of unease. You watch a group of them attempting a formation drill, tripping over their own feet, and you sigh inwardly. Bless their hearts, they are trying. One mainstream historical fact that now becomes undeniably present is the regular arrival of Viking fleets. You hear accounts of coastal towns being raided, of churches being plundered, of settlements being burned. These are not isolated incidents anymore. They are a persistent, devastating threat. The sound of a ship's horn, once a rare occurrence, now strikes fear into the hearts of those along the coast. You feel the palpable fear, the desperate scramble for safety, the quiet mourning for lost loved ones and destroyed homes. It's a grim reality, far removed from the peaceful idyll of Aethelred's earlier years. A quirky tidbit that emerges from this period of anxiety is the widespread use of protective charms and amulets. You see people wearing carved runes, carrying small bags of herbs, or reciting ancient incantations, all in an attempt to ward off the malevolent forces of the raiders. There's a desperate hope, a reliance on folk magic to supplement the inadequacy of military defenses. You observe a woman carefully tying a small pouch of dried herbs around her child's neck, her face etched with worry. It's a poignant display of human vulnerability and the enduring power of belief, even in the face of overwhelming odds. You wonder if any of them actually worked, or if they just offered a tiny bit of comfort. Probably the latter. Historians still argue about the true motivations behind the intensified Viking raids during Aethelred's reign. Were they simply seeking plunder, or were they aiming for permanent settlement and conquest? You see evidence that supports both theories. There are raids that are clearly hit-and-run affairs, focused on loot. But there are also instances of Viking forces wintering in England, building fortifications and demanding tribute, suggesting a more long-term ambition. This scholarly debate highlights the complex and evolving nature of the Viking threat, which was far from a monolithic entity. You ponder the shifting intentions of these northern warriors, a blend of opportunism and strategic design. It's a good thing no one tried to negotiate a long-term lease with them. The kingdom, once so seemingly stable, begins to show signs of strain. Resources are diverted to defense, taxes are increased to pay the mounting Danegeld, and the constant threat of attack wears down the morale of the populace. You notice the worried expressions on people's faces, the hushed conversations, the sense of a world that is slowly, inexorably slipping into chaos. Yet even in this turmoil, the fundamental routines of life persist. Farmers still plant their crops, artisans still ply their trades, and the church still offers solace and guidance. It's a testament to the resilience of human society, its ability to find continuity even in the face of immense pressure. You see a glimmer of hope in the quiet determination of ordinary people, a reminder that even when kings are mostly ignored, life finds a way to carry on. The distant drumbeat of Viking incursions has now become a persistent, rhythmic throb in the fabric of Aethelred's kingdom. You observe the king, increasingly burdened by the weight of these relentless attacks, making decisions that often seem reactive rather than proactive. He tries various approaches, sometimes paying more Danegeld, sometimes attempting to raise larger armies, sometimes even launching counterattacks that rarely achieve decisive victory. He is a man constantly attempting to patch holes in a leaking ship, and you feel a quiet despair for his increasingly futile efforts. His reign, once so uneventful, is now defined by a quiet, agonizing struggle against an relentless tide. You witness the devastating impact of these raids on local communities. Villages are abandoned, fields lie fallow, and the once thriving trade routes are disrupted. You see families displaced, seeking refuge in safer areas, their possessions reduced to what they can carry. The quiet despair is palpable, a heavy shroud that settles over the land. It's a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the brutal realities of medieval warfare. You even see the remnants of burned-out longhouses, their charred timbers a silent testament to the violence that has swept through. It's a grim picture, one that makes you yearn for the earlier, quieter days. One mainstream historical fact that stands out is the growing power of the Ealdormen, powerful regional nobles who often commanded their own forces and sometimes acted with a degree of independence from the king. As the central authority struggles to respond effectively to the Viking threat, these local leaders become increasingly important, for better or worse. You observe their councils, their efforts to defend their own lands, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. It's a fragmentation of power, a sign of the weakening grip of the central government. You might even hear whispers of rivalry and mistrust between these powerful figures, further complicating the kingdom's defense. A quirky tidbit that emerges from this time of upheaval is the surprising resilience of Anglo-Saxon artistic traditions, even amidst the chaos. Despite the destruction, you still see evidence of intricate metalwork, beautiful illuminated manuscripts, and skilled carving. Artists and craftsmen continue to create, perhaps as an act of defiance, or simply as a way to find beauty and meaning in a harsh world. You observe a craftsman meticulously working on a piece of jewelry, his hands steady, his focus unbroken by the sounds of distant alarms. It's a testament to the enduring human spirit, its ability to find expression even in times of great duress. You wonder if they ever worried about their art being plundered by the Vikings. Probably. Historians still argue about the extent to which Aethelred's own character and decisions contributed to the kingdom's vulnerability. Was he genuinely indecisive and ineffective, or was he simply dealt an unwinnable hand by a particularly aggressive wave of Viking expansion? You see evidence that could support both interpretations. He certainly appears to struggle with consistent policy, sometimes vacillating between resistance and appeasement. But the sheer scale and persistence of the Viking attacks were unprecedented, posing a challenge that perhaps no king could have fully overcome. This scholarly debate adds a layer of complexity to the narrative, preventing easy judgment. You might even feel a pang of sympathy for the king, burdened by a crisis of epic proportions. It's like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teacup. The social fabric of the kingdom begins to fray. The bonds of loyalty, once strong, are tested by the constant threat and the perceived inability of the king to provide adequate protection. You notice the increased migration of people seeking refuge in safer areas, leading to population shifts and economic disruption. Yet, even in this darkening period, you still see acts of courage and defiance. Communities band together, defending their churches and homes with fierce determination. You observe small, local victories against raiding parties, moments of temporary triumph against the overwhelming odds. It's a testament to the enduring human spirit, its capacity for resilience even in the face of relentless adversity. You recognize that even an uneventful reign can become a crucible of quiet heroism. The steady drumbeat of Viking attacks now reaches a chilling crescendo, and you observe Aethelred's reign, once characterized by its quietude, descending into a period of profound crisis. The land is increasingly ravaged, not just by hit-and-run raids, but by more organized campaigns aimed at deeper penetration and more systematic plunder. You see the king, his face etched with worry and fatigue, grappling with a situation that seems increasingly beyond his control. He looks less like a monarch and more like a man overwhelmed by an impossible task. You almost want to reach out and offer him a calming cup of chamomile tea, or perhaps a stronger beverage. You witness the increasing desperation for funds to pay the Danegeld. The taxes levied on the populace are enormous, crippling the economy and fueling resentment. You see the silver being meticulously weighed, the vast sums being handed over to the Viking leaders, only for them to return, often within a few years, demanding more. It's a vicious cycle, a self-perpetuating drain on the kingdom's wealth and morale. You feel the collective sigh of resignation from the people, their quiet anger at a policy that seems to offer only temporary reprieve. It's a constant, painful bleeding of the kingdom's resources. One mainstream historical fact that becomes starkly clear is the development of formalized, large-scale Viking armies, often led by Arfall jarls or even kings, rather than just smaller raiding parties. These are not just pirates, they are organized military forces, capable of sustained campaigns and demanding significant concessions. You observe the sheer scale of their operations, their longships filling the estuaries, their forces marching deep into the interior. It's a shift from nuisance to existential threat, and the kingdom struggles to respond. You see the fear in people's eyes, a fear that has moved beyond mere apprehension to a deep, chilling dread. A quirky tidbit that stands out during this period of intense pressure is the Anglo-Saxon practice of burying hoards of valuables to protect them from raiders. You hear stories of villagers digging holes in their fields or hiding precious items in secret caches, hoping to retrieve them once the danger passed. Often, these hoards were never recovered, becoming archaeological treasures centuries later. You can almost feel the frantic energy, the desperate hope that animated these actions. It's a poignant reminder of the pervasive fear and the lengths people would go to protect what little they had. You wonder how many family heirlooms were lost to the ground, waiting patiently for a new age to discover them. Historians still argue about the precise impact of the Battle of Maldon in 991, a significant defeat for the Anglo-Saxons, on Aethelred's reign and the subsequent increase in Danegeld payments. Was it a decisive turning point that shattered Anglo-Saxon morale and resistance, or was it just one of many defeats in a prolonged conflict? You see the echoes of its impact in the increased despair and the more frequent payments of tribute. This scholarly debate highlights the way historians interpret individual events within a larger narrative, seeking to understand their broader significance. You might even imagine the brave but ultimately futile stand of the Anglo-Saxon warriors, their sacrifice a testament to their loyalty, even if their king was mostly ignored. The land itself seems to groan under the weight of the constant attacks. Forests are cut down to build fortifications, fields are abandoned, and the infrastructure of the kingdom begins to crumble. You notice the decline in trade, the emptying of once bustling markets, the sense of a society under siege. Yet, even in this dire situation, you still witness glimpses of ordinary life persisting. Children still play, albeit with more wary eyes, and people still gather in their communities, seeking comfort in shared resilience. It's a stark illustration of humanity's persistent need for normalcy, even when surrounded by chaos. You feel a deep empathy for the people caught in this historical storm, their lives turned upside down by forces far beyond their control. The constant, relentless pressure of the Viking incursions has now pushed Aethelred's reign into a state of chronic instability. You observe the king, visibly older and more weary, struggling to maintain any semblance of control. His policies seem increasingly desperate, marked by a frustrating inconsistency. He attempts to raise larger armies, only to see them dissolve due to desertion or internal divisions. He pays more and more Danegeld, but the payments only seem to whet the appetites of the Viking leaders for further tribute. You sense a profound weariness in the land, a quiet exhaustion that permeates every aspect of life. It's a reign that has become a slow, agonizing slide into decline. You witness the increasing internal dissent within the kingdom. The Ealdormen, once powerful allies, now sometimes act with open defiance, prioritizing the defense of their own territories over the needs of the wider kingdom. Trust between different factions erodes, and the central authority struggles to command loyalty. You hear whispers of betrayal, of alliances broken, of powerful figures looking out only for themselves. It's a tragic unraveling of the social fabric, a consequence of relentless external pressure. You might even find yourself shaking your head in frustration at the lack of unified leadership. One mainstream historical fact that now becomes undeniably present is the increasing use of mercenary forces by Aethelred. Desperate for trained soldiers, he employs Vikings who have settled in England or others from various northern lands, often with mixed results. These forces are expensive, their loyalty often questionable, and their presence can sometimes cause more problems than they solve. You observe the uneasy coexistence between these foreign warriors and the native Anglo-Saxons, a relationship often strained by suspicion and resentment. It's a measure of the king's desperation, a clear sign that traditional means of defense are no longer sufficient. A quirky tidbit that emerges from this chaotic period is the surprisingly sophisticated network of forgery that developed around royal charters and land grants. As the kingdom's administration weakened, unscrupulous individuals would forge documents to claim land or privileges, taking advantage of the turmoil. You hear tales of elaborate forgeries, of cunning individuals who exploited the instability for personal gain. It's a dark mirror to the legitimate administrative work of earlier years, a sign of corruption creeping into the system. You almost admire the audacity of these medieval con artists, even as you lament the chaos they exploited. Imagine someone trying to claim your garden shed with a crudely drawn map and a forged signature from the king. Historians still argue about the role of the clergy in Aethelred's court during this period of crisis. Did they provide strong, consistent advice to the king, or were they themselves divided and unable to offer effective guidance? You see evidence that supports both interpretations. Some prominent churchmen appear to have been loyal and wise counselors, urging resistance and reform. Others seem to have been more concerned with their own ecclesiastical affairs, or perhaps even played a part in the political maneuvering. This scholarly debate highlights the complex role of the church in medieval politics, its influence often intertwined with secular power struggles. You might even wonder if any of the bishops secretly wished they had a stronger king to advise. The concept of the burh, fortified towns established by earlier kings as defensive strongholds, becomes even more critical, though many are now besieged or fall to the invaders. You see communities retreating behind their walls, hoping to weather the storm, their lives circumscribed by the constant threat. The agricultural hinterland becomes increasingly dangerous, forcing people into crowded urban centers. It's a grim picture of a kingdom in contraction, its population squeezed into ever smaller pockets of safety. You notice the grim determination in the faces of the townsfolk, their collective resolve to protect their homes, even if their king seems powerless to protect them. The once long and uneventful reign has now become a long and agonizing one, a test of endurance for an entire people. The quiet desperation that has permeated Aethelred's reign now deepens, casting a long shadow over the entire kingdom. You observe the king, his features drawn and etched with resignation, making concessions that would have been unthinkable in earlier, more peaceful times. He is a ruler who has seen his power erode, his authority questioned, and his people suffer under a relentless onslaught. His attempts to resist are increasingly sporadic and ineffective, often leading to further devastation. You feel a profound sense of historical sadness, witnessing the slow decline of a once proud kingdom. You witness the increasing instances of internal betrayals and feuds among the Anglo-Saxon nobility. The constant pressure from the Vikings exacerbates existing rivalries, leading to fractured loyalties and a lack of unified defense. Powerful ealdormen sometimes make separate treaties with the Vikings, or even actively betray their countrymen in exchange for temporary safety or personal gain. It's a tragic breakdown of trust, a testament to the corrosive effects of prolonged warfare and fear. You might even find yourself sighing in exasperation at the infighting, wondering how a kingdom can survive such disunity. One mainstream historical fact that now becomes a painful reality is the widespread devastation of the English landscape. Villages are burned, crops are destroyed, and infrastructure such as bridges and roads falls into disrepair. The economic lifeblood of the kingdom is severely impacted, leading to widespread poverty and famine in many areas. You see the signs of this destruction everywhere: abandoned fields, ghostly ruins, and gaunt faces etched with hunger. It's a grim tableau of a land under siege, its resources plundered, its people suffering. The once gentle landscape now bears the scars of relentless conflict. A quirky tidbit that emerges from this period of widespread suffering is the surprising endurance of folk remedies and healing practices. Despite the devastation, people still turn to traditional healers, herbalists, and local wisdom to combat illness and injury. You might hear of poultices made from specific plants, of charms whispered over wounds, of a deep reliance on the natural world for sustenance and healing. It's a reminder of the resilience of everyday life and the persistent human need for comfort and care, even when the broader world is in turmoil. You can almost smell the pungent aroma of healing herbs, a faint scent of hope in the midst of despair. You wonder if any of these remedies worked, or if it was just wishful thinking. Historians still argue about the long-term demographic impact of the Viking raids on Anglo-Saxon England. Did they lead to a significant decline in population, or was the impact more localized and temporary? You see evidence that suggests both. Some areas undoubtedly suffered severe population loss, while others, particularly the fortified towns, might have even seen an influx of refugees. This scholarly debate highlights the challenge of reconstructing population dynamics from limited historical sources, especially during periods of extreme upheaval. You might even imagine the silent migrations, the desperate search for safety, as people abandoned their homes and sought refuge elsewhere. The very identity of the kingdom begins to shift. The distinct Anglo-Saxon culture, once so dominant, now begins to intermingle with Norse influences, particularly in the areas that have been settled by the Vikings. You hear subtle changes in language, see new customs emerging, and witness the slow, almost imperceptible blending of two distinct cultures. It's a process of forced integration, a consequence of conquest and prolonged contact. You realize that even in defeat, cultural exchange can occur, shaping the future in unexpected ways. The once distinct Anglo-Saxon identity is now subtly, irrevocably altered. You reflect on how a kingdom can slowly, quietly, lose its distinct character, not with a bang but with a whisper. The inexorable decline of Aethelred's kingdom continues its slow, agonizing crawl. You observe the king, now a figure of profound weariness, his face a mask of quiet defeat. He has spent so many years attempting to appease, to resist, to manage an unmanageable crisis, and the strain is evident. His decisions, once merely inconsistent, now border on the erratic, reflecting a king who is deeply, thoroughly exhausted. His long reign, once noted for its quietude, has become a testament to the endurance of a sustained, low-level catastrophe. You almost feel a need to sit him down and offer him a blanket and a warm drink. You witness the kingdom's dwindling ability to mount any effective resistance. The field, once a source of local defense, is often dispersed or demoralized. The collection of Danegeld becomes a logistical nightmare, further depleting the kingdom's already strained resources. You see the quiet despair in the eyes of the people, their hopes slowly ebbing away with each passing year, each new raid. It's a period of collective resignation, a sense that the inevitable is simply being delayed, not prevented. You even notice the very air feels heavier, laden with a sense of historical gloom. One mainstream historical fact that now becomes chillingly clear is the increasing ambition of the Viking leaders, particularly figures like Sweyn Forkbeard, the King of Denmark. Their aim is no longer just plunder or tribute. It is outright conquest and the establishment of a permanent Danish rule over England. You observe the shift in their tactics, from hit-and-run raids to systematic campaigns of occupation. It's a fundamental change in the nature of the threat, and Aethelred's kingdom, already weakened, is ill-equipped to meet it. You recognize the chilling reality of a power shift, a change that will fundamentally alter the course of English history. A quirky tidbit that emerges from this era of impending doom is the surprising prevalence of prophetic dreams and visions among the populace. As the world around them became increasingly chaotic, people sought solace and meaning in signs and omens, believing that divine intervention might be the only way to avert catastrophe. You hear hushed accounts of strange visions, of warnings from saints, of whispers from the spiritual realm. It's a testament to the human need for understanding and hope, even when faced with overwhelming despair. You wonder if any of these visions were ever accurate, or if they were merely reflections of the collective anxiety. Probably a bit of both, with a generous helping of fear-induced imagination. Historians still argue about the role of internal politics and rivalries in weakening Aethelred's response to the Viking threat. Was the kingdom's disunity a primary cause of its downfall, or was it merely a symptom of the overwhelming external pressure? You see evidence that suggests both factors played a significant role. The lack of cohesive leadership, the constant infighting among the nobility, and the erosion of trust undoubtedly hampered any effective defense. But the sheer scale of the Viking onslaught would have tested even the most unified kingdom. This scholarly debate emphasizes the complex interplay of internal and external forces in shaping historical outcomes. You might even find yourself pondering the timeless question of human nature. Do we crumble from within, or are we simply overwhelmed from without? The once vibrant Anglo-Saxon culture begins to show signs of decline, particularly in its written output and artistic endeavors, as resources are diverted to defense and the focus shifts to mere survival. You notice fewer new manuscripts being produced, less elaborate metalwork, a general sense of cultural contraction. It's a poignant reminder that periods of sustained conflict can stifle not just economic prosperity, but also artistic and intellectual flourishing. Yet, even in this decline, sparks of creativity still persist, quiet acts of defiance against the encroaching darkness. You see a lone scribe, meticulously copying an ancient text, his work a quiet act of preservation in a world that seems to be falling apart. You feel the weight of history pressing down, a heavy blanket woven from years of relentless struggle and quiet surrender. Aethelred's reign, now stretching into its final agonizing decade, is a testament to the endurance of misfortune. You observe the king, a shell of his former self, making increasingly desperate and often ill-advised decisions. His authority is openly flouted by some of his powerful ealdormen, and the kingdom itself feels less like a unified entity and more like a collection of desperate, isolated enclaves. The quiet suffering of the land is palpable, a constant, low thrum of despair. You witness the increasing flight of Anglo-Saxon nobles and their families to the continent, seeking refuge from the relentless Viking onslaught. They abandon their lands and their responsibilities, a clear sign of the crumbling morale among the elite. You see the silent departures, the hurried packing of what little can be salvaged, the poignant farewells to a homeland that can no longer offer safety. It's a powerful symbol of the kingdom's unraveling, a slow bleeding of its leadership and resources. You can almost hear the quiet, heartbroken whispers of those leaving, a mournful lament for a lost world. One mainstream historical fact that now takes center stage is the infamous St. Brice's Day massacre of 1002, an act of horrific violence orchestrated by Aethelred. In a desperate attempt to eliminate the Viking presence, he ordered the killing of all Danes in England. You feel a chilling sense of dread as you witness the consequences of this misguided act. Not the elimination of the threat, but rather an infuriated response from Sweyn Forkbeard, leading to even more brutal and widespread devastation. It's a tragic moment, a stark reminder that even a mostly ignored king can commit acts of profound consequence, usually negative ones. A quirky tidbit that emerges from this dark period is the surprisingly diverse ethnic makeup of England during this time. Despite the Anglo-Saxon dominance, there were pockets of Scandinavian settlers, as well as small communities of Franks, Frisians, and even some Jewish merchants. The St. Brice's Day massacre, though aimed at Danes, likely affected a broader range of people who simply looked or sounded Danish. It's a reminder that medieval England was more cosmopolitan than often imagined, a subtle complexity often overlooked in the broad strokes of historical narrative. You ponder the tragic irony. An attempt to purify the realm only highlighted its existing diversity. Historians still argue about the true effectiveness of the English fleet during Aethelred's later reign. While there were attempts to build and maintain a navy, it often suffered from desertion, treachery, and a lack of consistent funding. Was the fleet genuinely ineffective, or was it simply too small and poorly organized to counter the massive Viking naval power? You see evidence of both valiant efforts and frustrating failures. This scholarly debate highlights the challenges of naval warfare in the early medieval period and the difficulties of maintaining a standing military force over a long period of decline. You might even imagine the frustrated shipbuilders, watching their efforts literally go up in smoke. The once stable social order is now increasingly fractured. The lines between Anglo-Saxon and Dane blur in some areas, while in others the animosity intensifies. Raiding becomes endemic, not just from the Vikings, but also from opportunists within England itself, preying on the weak and unprotected. You notice the general breakdown of law and order in many regions, a quiet descent into anarchy. Yet, amidst this chaos, flashes of resilience and quiet determination still glimmer. Communities still try to protect their own, individuals still perform acts of kindness, and the church still offers its meager solace. It's a testament to the enduring human spirit, even when the world around it crumbles. The long and arduous journey through Aethelred's reign nears its most profound point of despair. You observe the king, now a truly broken figure, as Sweyn Forkbeard, the Danish king, launches a full-scale invasion with the explicit goal of conquering England. This is no longer a series of raids or demands for tribute. It is a meticulously planned campaign of subjugation. You feel the heavy sense of impending doom, a collective holding of breath as the kingdom braces for the inevitable. The quiet suffering of the past years now culminates in a stark, terrifying reality. You witness the widespread surrender of Anglo-Saxon forces and communities to Sweyn. Man, why towns and regions, exhausted by years of conflict and disillusioned by Aethelred's ineffective leadership, simply submit without a fight? You see the quiet processions of town elders offering keys to their gates, the weary faces of the populace accepting their new overlords. It's a poignant display of utter defeat, a testament to the toll that relentless warfare takes on a people's will to resist. You might even find yourself whispering, "Just let it be over." One mainstream historical fact that punctuates this period is Aethelred's flight to Normandy in 1013, seeking refuge with his wife Emma's brother, Duke Richard II. This act marks the symbolic end of his active reign, a king abandoning his kingdom in its darkest hour. You observe his hurried departure, his diminished retinue, the profound sense of personal and political collapse. It's a humbling moment for a king, a public acknowledgement of his inability to protect his realm. You can almost hear the silent judgment of history, a quiet condemnation of his retreat. A quirky tidbit that emerges from this era of exile and upheaval is the continued importance of portable wealth, particularly in the form of jewelry and precious objects. As people fled or faced uncertainty, they would carry their most valuable possessions with them, often sewn into their clothing or hidden in small pouches. These items were not just monetary. They were often deeply personal, family heirlooms representing continuity in a rapidly changing world. You imagine the weight of such treasures, both physical and emotional, as people made their desperate journeys. It's a testament to the human desire to cling to something tangible, something beautiful, amidst the chaos. Historians still argue about the precise reasons for the Anglo-Saxon elite's widespread surrender to Sweyn Forkbeard. Was it a pragmatic recognition of overwhelming power, a desire to end the prolonged suffering, or a deeper dissatisfaction with Aethelred's rule? You see elements of all these factors. The sheer weariness of decades of warfare, combined with a lack of faith in their king, certainly contributed to the swift capitulation. This scholarly debate highlights the complex motivations that drive political decisions in times of crisis, often a blend of self-preservation and calculated pragmatism. You might even consider it a form of political exhaustion, where simply ending the fight was more appealing than prolonging it. The very concept of an independent Anglo-Saxon kingdom seems to be slipping away. Sweyn Forkbeard establishes himself as king, accepting oaths of fealty from the English. You see the quiet, almost imperceptible shift in power, the new banners flying over familiar strongholds, the Danish customs slowly making their presence felt. It's a profound moment of historical transition, a quiet revolution rather than a violent overthrow. You realize that even a mostly ignored king's reign can be the backdrop for such a fundamental change in the course of history. The long, uneventful beginning has given way to a quiet, painful end, a slow fading of Anglo-Saxon independence. The air now holds a strange, almost surreal quality, a brief historical pause, a moment of breath before the inevitable. You observe Aethelred's temporary return to England after Sweyn Forkbeard's sudden death in 1014. It's a brief, almost phantom resurrection of his authority, a flicker of light in the deepening twilight of his reign. You see him attempting to reassert control, to rally his fragmented kingdom, but the weariness is still etched on his face, and the underlying weaknesses of his rule remain unchanged. It's like watching a fading ember briefly glow before finally dying out. You almost feel a pang of pity for him, a king who can't seem to catch a break. You witness the complex and often treacherous political maneuvering that characterizes this brief interlude. Sweyn's son, Cnut, still commands a powerful Viking army in England, and Aethelred faces immediate and formidable opposition. Loyalties are tested, alliances shift, and the kingdom remains deeply divided. You see powerful ealdormen playing both sides, attempting to secure their own positions regardless of who sits on the throne. It's a chaotic dance of power, a reflection of a kingdom still very much in flux, its future uncertain. You might even find yourself losing track of who is allied with whom, a bewildering tangle of allegiances. One mainstream historical fact that now becomes critically important is the election of Cnut as king by the Danish fleet in England upon Sweyn's death, immediately setting him in opposition to Aethelred. This highlights the fluidity of royal succession in this era, where military power and popular acclamation could supersede traditional claims to the throne. You observe the stark contrast between Cnut's decisive leadership and Aethelred's persistent indecision, a difference that will ultimately prove fatal for the Anglo-Saxon It's a clash of two very different approaches to kingship, and you know which one is likely to prevail. A quirky tidbit that stands out during this turbulent period is the reliance on formal oaths and pledges, even when their sincerity was clearly questionable. Rulers and nobles would swear solemn oaths of fealty, only to break them days or weeks later. You hear the pronouncements, the invocations of God and saints, knowing full well that they are often mere political tools. It's a fascinating insight into the gap between outward appearance and underlying reality in medieval politics. You wonder if anyone actually believed these oaths anymore, or if they were simply a necessary formality before the next betrayal. Probably the latter, with a healthy dose of cynicism. Historians still argue about whether Aethelred's return offered a genuine opportunity for Anglo-Saxon recovery, or if it was merely a temporary reprieve before inevitable Danish conquest. You see evidence that could support both interpretations. There were moments of renewed hope and resistance, suggesting a possibility of a comeback. But the deep-seated divisions and the overwhelming power of Cnut's forces ultimately made a lasting Anglo-Saxon restoration improbable. This scholarly debate highlights the contingencies of history, the what-ifs that linger around every major turning point. You might even find yourself pondering whether a stronger king could have turned the tide, or if the die was already cast. The brief resurgence of Anglo-Saxon resistance is short-lived. Cnut's forces regroup, and the conflict escalates once more. You notice the renewed despair in the faces of the people, the quiet resignation that their brief glimmer of hope is fading. It's a period of intense fighting, of shifting fortunes, but the overall trajectory remains clear. The Anglo-Saxon kingdom is on its last legs. You feel the exhaustion of a people who have endured too much, for too long, under a king who was mostly ignored in peacetime and mostly ineffective in war. The long and mostly uneventful reign now approaches its quiet, ignominious end. The final, agonizing act of Aethelred's long reign is now upon you. You observe the king, old beyond his years, his health failing, his spirit broken. He is a king who has spent his entire adult life trying, and largely failing, to manage a perpetual crisis. The constant pressure of Viking invasions, the internal divisions, and his own perceived indecisiveness have taken their toll. You feel the profound sense of historical closure, the quiet finality of a reign that, for all its length, seems destined to be remembered more for its struggles than its triumphs. You witness the relentless military campaigns of Senut, who systematically tightens his grip on England. His forces are disciplined, well-led, and ultimately overwhelming. The Anglo-Saxon resistance, while brave in isolated pockets, is fragmented and lacks central coordination. You see the gradual conquest of the country, shire by shire, town by town, a slow but inevitable process of subjugation. It's a grim testament to the power of a unified, determined enemy against a divided and weary kingdom. You might even find yourself looking away, unable to bear the quiet spectacle of defeat. One mainstream historical fact that marks this period is the final illness and death of King Aethelred in London in April 1016. His death, while a natural end to a long and troubled life, also marks the end of an era. It's a quiet passing, far from the battlefield but profoundly significant. You observe the hushed grief of his remaining loyalists, the mixed reactions of the wider populace, a sense of both loss and perhaps a quiet hope for a new beginning. It's the closing of a chapter, not with a bang but with a weary sigh. A quirky tidbit that stands out at the very end of Aethelred's life is the continued loyalty of some of his personal household and guards, even as the kingdom crumbled around him. Despite his perceived failings as a king, he still commanded a degree of personal allegiance from those closest to him. You hear anecdotes of their steadfastness, their quiet devotion to a man who, despite his flaws, was still their king. It's a testament to the enduring human bond of loyalty, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. You might even find a small, quiet comfort in this small act of faithfulness, a brief flicker of warmth in the deepening historical twilight. Historians still argue about Aethelred's legacy. Was he truly the unready, a term that translates to ill-counseled or no counsel, implying incompetence? Or was he a king who simply faced an impossible situation, a victim of circumstances beyond his control? You see evidence that supports both interpretations. His vacillation and inconsistent policies certainly contributed to the kingdom's vulnerability. But the scale of the Viking threat was unprecedented, and his reign occurred at a pivotal moment. In European history, this scholarly debate highlights the difficulty of assigning blame in complex historical events, urging a more nuanced understanding of human agency and historical forces. You might even feel a quiet sympathy for him, caught in the relentless grind of historical inevitability. The final days of Anglo-Saxon independence under Aethelred are a somber spectacle. You see the last vestiges of the old order slowly crumbling, replaced by the encroaching power of the Danes. The once familiar customs and institutions begin to give way, yielding to a new era. Yet, even in this quiet dissolution, the spirit of England, however bruised and battered, endures. You recognize that even an uneventful reign can serve as the grim prelude to a fundamental transformation, a quiet, almost imperceptible shift that reshapes a nation's destiny. The long and mostly ignored reign concludes not with a roar, but with a quiet, fading echo. With Aethelred's death, the historical landscape shifts, and you find yourself observing the immediate aftermath, a period of intense transition and continued conflict. His son, Edmund Ironside, briefly takes up the mantle of Anglo-Saxon resistance, demonstrating a vigor and military prowess that his father often lacked. You witness this brief, desperate surge of hope, a final, valiant stand against the inevitable. It's a poignant contrast to the quiet weariness of Aethelred's final years, a brief, fiery flicker before the darkness fully descends. You almost want to cheer for Edmund, a last hurrah for the Anglo-Saxon cause. You see the kingdom fractured and divided, with Cnut controlling large swathes of the country and Edmund desperately trying to hold onto the remaining Anglo-Saxon strongholds. The conflict is brutal and swift, marked by pitched battles and strategic maneuvers. You observe the exhaustion on the faces of the soldiers, the grim determination of the leaders, as two powerful figures vie for control of a ravaged land. It's a period of intense, concentrated warfare, a stark contrast to the drawn-out agony of Aethelred's reign. One mainstream historical fact that profoundly shapes this period is the Battle of Asandun in 1016, a decisive victory for Cnut that effectively ended Anglo-Saxon resistance. You observe the devastating defeat, the shattered remnants of the English army, the chilling realization that the dream of an independent Anglo-Saxon England is all but over. It's a somber moment, a turning point in history, a battle that seals the fate of a kingdom. You feel the weight of this historical moment, the silent despair of those who fought and lost. A quirky tidbit that emerges from this brutal conflict is the legend of Edmund Ironside's personal bravery in battle. Stories circulated of his fierce fighting, his willingness to lead from the front, and his remarkable physical strength. While often romanticized, these tales highlight the qualities that his father, Aethelred, was perceived to lack. It's a poignant contrast between two kings, one defined by his quiet struggles, the other by his brief, fiery resistance. You almost imagine him as a medieval action hero, a last gasp of heroic defiance. Historians still argue about the precise terms of the agreement between Edmund and Cnut after Asandun, and whether Edmund's subsequent death later that year was by natural causes or assassination. You see the ambiguity surrounding these events, the whispers of foul play, the convenient timing of Edmund's demise for Cnut's ambitions. This scholarly debate adds a layer of mystery to the end of Anglo-Saxon resistance, leaving lingering questions about the precise narrative of power transfer. You might even find yourself pondering the ultimate price of kingship and the sometimes brutal realities of medieval succession. With Edmund's death, Cnut becomes the undisputed king of all England. You observe the quiet transition of power, the absorption of Anglo-Saxon institutions into a broader Danish empire. The long and largely uneventful reign of Aethelred has now led directly to the profound transformation of England into a Danish kingdom. You see the new order taking shape, the new allegiances being formed, the quiet acceptance of a new reality. It's a testament to how even a quiet, largely ignored reign can be the crucial bridge between two distinct historical eras, a period of transition that shapes the future in profound ways. The long shadow of Aethelred's quiet reign stretches far, reaching even into this new, Danish-ruled England. The echoes of Aethelred's reign, though now silenced by his death and the ascendancy of Cnut, continue to resonate in the transformed landscape of England. You observe the subtle shifts in power, the integration of Danish customs and laws, and the complex process of consolidating a new empire. While Aethelred is no longer physically present, his long, troubled rule set the stage for this dramatic transition. You feel the historical ride. People effect, how a king's quiet struggles can lead to profound, almost revolutionary change in the generations that follow. You witness Cnut's pragmatic and surprisingly effective rule. He does not simply destroy Anglo-Saxon institutions, but often incorporates them, adapting them to his own needs. You see him issuing laws, maintaining order, and even fostering a degree of peace and prosperity after years of devastating conflict. It's a stark contrast to Aethelred's struggles, a testament to Cnut's skill as a ruler and his ability to unite disparate peoples under his banner. You might even feel a sense of relief, a quiet satisfaction that the chaos has finally given way to a more stable, albeit foreign, rule. One mainstream historical fact that illustrates Cnut's success is his vast North Sea empire, encompassing England, Denmark, and parts of Norway and Sweden. You observe the interconnectedness of these lands, the flow of trade and people, and the sense of a new, powerful political entity emerging on the European stage. It's a grand vision, a testament to Cnut's ambition and strategic genius, a far cry from the provincial concerns that so often dominated Aethelred's attention. You recognize the profound geopolitical shift that has occurred, a direct consequence of the long, drawn-out conflict that defined Aethelred's reign. A quirky tidbit that emerges from this period of Danish rule is the continued use of Anglo-Saxon coins and mints, albeit with Cnut's image on them. The existing economic infrastructure was largely maintained, even as the political landscape shifted. You see the familiar designs, now subtly altered, a testament to the practicalities of governance overriding wholesale cultural change. It's a quiet symbol of continuity amidst transformation, a subtle blending of old and new. You might even find yourself admiring the practical efficiency of it all, a quiet nod to the enduring power of economic systems. Historians still argue about the long-term impact of Danish rule on English identity and culture. Was it a fundamental rupture, leading to a new Anglo-Danish synthesis, or did Anglo-Saxon traditions largely persist, eventually reasserting themselves? You see evidence that supports both arguments. There's undeniable Norse influence in language, place names, and legal practices, but also a strong continuity of Anglo-Saxon institutions and customs. This scholarly debate highlights the complex and often subtle ways in which cultures interact and evolve, leaving a lasting legacy that is often difficult to neatly categorize. You might even consider how much of modern English society still carries echoes of both these ancient traditions. The memory of Aethelred, the Unready, begins to solidify in the historical consciousness, a quiet counterpoint to the powerful and successful Cnut. His reign becomes a cautionary tale, a symbol of what happens when a kingdom is ill-prepared and ill-led. You hear the hushed whispers, the subtle criticisms, the quiet judgment of later generations. Yet, even in this negative portrayal, you recognize the enduring human need to categorize, to simplify complex historical narratives into memorable lessons. His long, mostly ignored reign is now, ironically, remembered precisely for its ignoble quietude, a footnote in the grander tapestry of conquest. You realize that even a king who sought to avoid conflict can ultimately become defined by it. The long shadow of Aethelred's mostly ignored reign stretches even further, subtly shaping the future even after the direct impact of Danish rule begins to wane. You observe the eventual return of an Anglo-Saxon king, Edward the Confessor, albeit one deeply influenced by his Norman upbringing during exile. The quiet complexities of succession, the lingering rivalries, and the profound changes wrought by the Danish interlude all have their roots in the tumultuous period that defined Aethelred's rule. You feel the historical reverberations, how seemingly small or uneventful actions can set in motion a chain of events with far-reaching consequences. You witness the delicate balancing act that Edward the Confessor performs, attempting to re-establish Anglo-Saxon authority while navigating the powerful Danish influence and the growing ambitions of the Norman dukes. His court is a mix of Anglo-Saxon, Danish, and Norman elements, a reflection of the complex cultural tapestry that England has become. You see the quiet tensions, the unspoken rivalries, and the constant threat of renewed conflict. It's a period of uneasy peace, a fragile calm before another historical storm. You might even find yourself holding your breath, knowing what is yet to come. One mainstream historical fact that underscores this period is Edward the Confessor's childlessness and the subsequent succession crisis that ultimately leads to the Norman conquest. Aethelred's own large family, including Edward, was scattered and exiled during the Danish conquest, and their eventual return is a direct consequence of that upheaval. You observe the growing anxiety around the succession, the various claimants emerging, and the sense of a kingdom teetering on the brink of another dramatic change. It's a powerful illustration of how the quiet misfortunes of one reign can ripple through generations, shaping the destiny of an entire nation. A quirky tidbit that emerges from this era of cultural blending is the increasing adoption of Norman French words into the English language, even before the conquest. Edward's Norman connections meant that many of his courtiers and advisors spoke French, and their vocabulary slowly began to seep into the Anglo-Saxon tongue. You hear the subtle shifts in pronunciation, the gradual introduction of new terms, a quiet linguistic transformation that foreshadows the dramatic changes to come. It's a fascinating insight into the organic evolution of language, a process that is often far more gradual than grand historical events. You might even find yourself listening for these linguistic clues, a subtle nod to the future. Historians still argue about the extent to which Edward the Confessor's perceived pro-Norman leanings contributed to the eventual Norman conquest. Was he deliberately paving the way for William, or was he simply trying to secure alliances and ensure a stable succession in a volatile political landscape? You see evidence that supports both interpretations. His appointment of Norman advisors and his long-standing ties to Normandy certainly influenced events. But the complex web of European politics and the ambitions of various powerful figures also played a crucial role. This scholarly debate highlights the challenges of interpreting historical motivations, especially when personal ties and political expediency are intertwined. You might even consider how personal connections, even those from a mostly ignored king's exile, can have such monumental consequences. The quiet, almost forgotten legacy of Aethelred continues to exert its subtle influence. The kingdom he left behind, battered and transformed by the Danish incursions, was fundamentally different from the one he inherited. His long, mostly uneventful reign, punctuated by intense periods of crisis, served as a crucible for change, forging a new England from the ashes of the old. You recognize that even a king who was not a grand figure of history can still be a pivotal one, his quiet struggles and failures ultimately shaping the course of an entire nation. The journey through his reign, once seemingly uneventful, now reveals itself as a crucial, if somber, turning point. And so, you arrive at the quiet culmination of your historical journey, not with a flourish, but with a gentle fading into the grand tapestry of time. The long and mostly ignored reign of King Aethelred, far from being a blank page in history, has revealed itself as a crucial, albeit somber, prelude to profound transformations. You observe the ripples of his rule extending forward, touching the Norman conquest, and shaping the very foundations of English identity. It's a testament to the intricate interconnectedness of history, where even the quietest reigns leave an indelible mark. You see the lasting impact of the Danish settlement, the changes in language, law, and culture that persist long after Cnut's empire recedes. The very landscape bears the scars and the new patterns forged during Aethelred's era of crisis. The strength of the Anglo-Saxon Church, its wealth often a target for Viking plunder, also played a crucial role in maintaining continuity and preserving learning, a quiet resilience in the face of immense pressure. You feel the deep roots of these changes, how they weave through the centuries, creating the England that would eventually emerge. One mainstream historical fact that brings this journey to a gentle close is the enduring nature of English institutions, even through periods of immense upheaval. While Aethelred's reign saw significant challenges, the underlying structures of governance, law, and local administration often persisted, adapting and evolving rather than completely collapsing. You recognize the fundamental resilience of a society, its ability to find continuity even when its kings are struggling. It's a quiet strength, a testament to the people themselves who built and sustained the kingdom, often despite their rulers. A quirky tidbit that offers a final, gentle chuckle is the eventual historical irony that Aethelred's son, Edward the Confessor, would become revered as a saint, a stark contrast to his father's unready moniker. This post-mortem reputation demonstrates how later generations reinterpret and selectively remember the past, sometimes elevating figures whose earthly reigns were far from glorious. You ponder the capricious nature of historical memory, how a king once dismissed can later be canonized, a quiet revision of his otherwise unremarkable legacy. It's almost as if history has a sense of humor, quietly correcting itself over time. Historians still argue about the precise moment when the Anglo-Saxon identity began to truly merge with other influences, leading to the broader English identity that would eventually emerge. Was it during the Danish rule, or later, after the Norman conquest? You see evidence of this slow, imperceptible blending throughout Aethelred's reign, as various peoples encountered and influenced one another, often under duress. This scholarly debate highlights the fluidity of national identity, its continuous evolution rather than a static, unchanging essence. You might even feel a sense of wonder at how something so complex and vast can be forged through such quiet, often unnoticed, processes. The long and mostly uneventful reign of King Aethelred, often overlooked in the grand sweep of history, was in its own way profoundly significant. It was a period of prolonged suffering, certainly, but also a crucible that forged new realities, new connections, and ultimately, a new England. You leave this historical landscape with a quiet understanding, a deeper appreciation for the subtle currents that shape the past, and the often unsung figures who, through their very quietude, lay the groundwork for what is to come. The dust motes still dance in the sunbeams, but now you see the intricate patterns they form, the unseen forces that guide their gentle movement. And as you prepare to drift back to your own time, you carry with you the quiet hum of a history that, once ignored, has revealed its quiet power. So, as the last echoes of Aethelred's long and mostly ignored reign fade into the quiet expanse of history, let your mind drift with them. Imagine the soft lapping of waves on a distant shore, a gentle, rhythmic sound that soothes and calms. Feel the gentle breeze, like a whisper against your skin, carrying away any lingering thoughts or worries. The burdens of medieval kings, the anxieties of ancient battles, they are all settling now, becoming just distant echoes in the vastness of time. Allow your body to relax, sinking deeper into the comfort of your bed, as if you are floating on a calm, dark lake. The stories we've shared tonight, the quiet moments of history, are now like soft shadows in the twilight. There's no need to hold on to them, no need to untangle their threads. Just let them soften, blur, and dissolve into the peaceful quiet that surrounds you. The air around you is still and warm, a gentle cocoon of serenity. You are safe, you are comfortable, and the world outside is slowly, peacefully fading away. The quiet hum of the night is a lullaby, a soft, reassuring melody that guides you deeper into rest. Let your eyelids grow heavy, your breathing become even and slow. All is well, all is quiet, and the gentle current of sleep is now carrying you away. Just breathe and let go.